Chester and Gus by Cammie McGovern. A new idea. Gus is definitely getting used to me. Sarah notices it too. In the morning, as Mark gets dressed for work, she asks if he's noticed. I don't know what Mark does for a job, but he smells like wood and sawdust and sometimes paint. I love how Mark smells. I love that he hardly ever washes his pants. He takes them off next to the bed, and in the morning, he steps back into them. When he says, "I guess so, maybe," Sarah says, "It's making me think about that idea I had. I called the school yesterday and asked if they'd be willing to consider having Chester in school with Gus a few hours a day, and they're willing to at least talk to me about it. Mr. McGregor told me to stop by." I can tell Mark is surprised by the way he looks up. "The principal?" "Yes, we'd have to get it approved by the new teacher and also have to make sure no child in his classroom has an allergy." "Did you tell him that Chester's not an official service dog?" I did some research, and it turns out those rules are a lot looser than I thought. There are all kinds of service dogs, and there's no official licensing test or anything like that. You just have to prove that the dog performs a necessary task that the disabled person can't perform for themselves. SDI is a private organization that only certifies its best dogs, but the state doesn't mandate any certification. I read a whole forum online last night. A lot of people said they'd use their SDI dropout dogs as regular service dogs. Some of them turned their old dog in training vests inside out, and no one ever asked a single question. Mark shakes his head. "I don't know, Sarah. Chester wants to work, Mark. I watch him all day, and I can tell. He'll bring me things he thinks I've lost, like socks and car keys. It's like he spends all day showing me everything he can do. During the day when you're gone, every time I turn around, he's sitting behind me waiting for an assignment. Sometimes I ask him to get my keys just so he feels useful." Now I feel embarrassed, of course. I'd wondered about all the key fetching I'd done. I thought maybe her office was full of locks. I'm not saying he'd have to go to school every day. Maybe he'd go a few mornings a week. I just want to try something that'll make this year better than last year. I don't want to start making demands on school again if we're not sure it'll do any good. Last year they spent a lot of money on a talking computer that Gus refused to learn how to use. But we had to try it, right? He's a nonverbal 10-year-old. We have to try alternative communication for him while he's still young enough to learn it. Look, Sarah, what would we be trying to accomplish by sending Chester into school with Gus? He still makes Gus nervous. I'll admit he's gotten better, but it's not like they have some magical bond. You're not home all day with them. You don't see what I do. What do you see? Does Gus ever go out over to him or voluntarily interact with him? Not exactly, but there's something happening below the surface. I feel it. Gus is aware of Chester, and it's making him more aware of other things too. Like what? I'm not sure how to describe it. Is he using any new words? No. He repeats a little more, but he doesn't use any new words. Does he respond when you ask him to do something? Not really. Not without counting into 3. So what's different? Well, maybe this will seem silly, but I'll see Gus at his window and Chester sitting behind him. Then I'll look again, maybe half an hour later, and they're both still in the exact same position, only Gus has turned his body a little bit so Chester can look out the window too, like he's aware of Chester and doesn't want to block his view. It's funny that she noticed that. I noticed it too. That's how I figured out Gus isn't really looking out the window, because there's nothing there. He's doing something else, but I don't know what it is. And you think that's significant, that he moved 2 inches for the dog? I think it's significant that they stayed in the same room together for half an hour without moving more than 2 inches. Yes, I do. Mark sits down on the bed beside her. I think Chester is a very sweet dog who's been trained to sit for 2 hours without moving if his person needs that. I'm not sure it means anything except he knows how to sit still for a long time. But think about it, Mark. He's never been told that he's supposed to work with Gus. He figured it out himself. Doesn't that tell you that he wants this job? I don't know if this is the answer, but I feel like we have to try something. There's so much emotion in her voice. I go closer and put my head in her lap, the way I always did with Penny. Mark scoots closer to her. He can't stand to see her cry either, but he can do more than I can because he has arms. It's nice to see him hug her. It makes me wish I had arms too. How to build a nest. The minute I heard Sarah's idea yesterday, I started to get nervous. All morning while Sarah's at school talking to the principal, I think about my problem. Being too anxious, overreacting to loud sounds, these are bad problems to have. But they also mean I understand what Gus feels like. I know why he puts his fingers in his ears when things get loud and noisy. I only wish I could do the same thing with my paws. I also know what it feels like when your body does things you don't want it to, like run under a bed during a thunderstorm. Gus doesn't do this, but I do. I can't help it. I just have to get under something during a thunderstorm. Gus does other things like rock back and forth on his toes and flap his hands and hold his sparkly pen up to the corner of his eye. That's his way of hiding under the bed. He gets very loud and tries to do all his favorite things at once so his body will calm down. Gus is scared of a lot of things. I smell it all the time, whenever he hears an unexpected sound, whenever I bark, or even just walk past his room with my toenails clicking the floor. Noises hurt his ears, and I make too many of them. I wish there was a way to promise him I won't ever bark at school, but there isn't. He'll be anxious all the time, his fingers ready to jam in his ears in case I bark. I want this job, but I'm afraid Mark might be right. This isn't the right job for a dog to have. I don't think Gus needs a dog. He needs a world that is very quiet and a family who will let him do exactly what he wants to do all day long, which is look out the window. I don't know what he thinks about when he stares out the window, but that's when he smells the happiest. It's the only time, really, when he smells calm. The rest of the time, he smells nervous, doing everything Sarah makes him do. Going on errands, helping her cook dinner, taking me for a walk. He doesn't like any of it. It all makes him anxious. He loves his mom, but he knows he can never make her happy, which is sad for him, I think. I'm not sure. Because I can't smell quiet emotions underneath the surface. I can only smell big ones. I remember when we were getting ready to return to the farm to test my skills and maybe find a match for me. Penny said she was sure I would pass the test. She had no doubts at all. The main question will be pairing you with the right person. You can be the best dog in the room, but you still need to find the right match. That's what I'm most nervous about. Now, we know she should have been more nervous about a few other things, too. Now, I know wanting a job isn't the same thing as being able to do it. Sarah's at the school for a long time, talking to them about letting me come to class while Mark stays home with Gus and me. Sitting behind Gus, staring out his window, I've noticed something interesting. A pair of birds is building a nest on the front porch. I don't understand what they're saying because bird noises are hard for a dog to interpret. It seems like they're fighting most of the time, but still, by the end of the morning, they've got a nest in the rafters for the mother to lay her eggs in. I can only imagine how accomplished they must feel. They had a job and they did it. Gets me wanting to feel the same way. Something to love. They said yes, Sarah screams the minute she walks in the door. She's very happy, clapping her hands and laughing. Everyone was so nice. It's like they still feel bad about last year or something. What happened last year? I want to ask. I walk over to Sarah and put my head in her lap. So maybe she'll say what happened last year. She doesn't. Did you tell them he's not an official service dog? I called him a therapy dog, which is different. He'll just spend a few hours a day at school helping Gus socialize with other kids. And they were okay with that? Yes, Sarah smiles. I told them if there were any problems, I'll come right back and pick them up. We're going to be very flexible about it all. Mark makes a face like he's not too sure. Oh, Mark, don't imagine problems before we had any. Okay, so did you meet the new teacher? Her name is Moraine Winger, and she seems great. She didn't spend our whole first meeting talking about how to manage behaviors, which I loved. She asked a lot of questions about what Gus loves and what his passions are. What did you tell her? That was the problem. I almost said Thomas the Tank Engine, but he hasn't played with those for years, has he? Her question got me thinking. We don't really know what he cares about anymore, except staring out the window. Mark thinks about it. He's calmer these days, which must mean he's happier, right? It's hard for us to guess what's in his head. No, I know. I just wish he'd find something that he loves, that's all, the way he used to love trains. I think about all the things I love, chew toys mostly, balls, food, Penny, who I love and still miss. I know Gus well enough to know balls aren't his passion, though I've seen him chew the collar of his shirt. I don't think chew toys would be a good bet. This gives me something to work on at school, though. Maybe I can help him find something he loves. Expectations. I've now heard the words 5th grade so many times, I thought maybe it was the name of Gus's school. You're going to have fun in 5th grade, Sarah says. Chester's going to love 5th grade, and so are you, Gus. In 5th grade, the subjects get really interesting. You'll finally get to study American history. Remember how you loved our trip to Williamsburg and the Freedom Trail in Boston with the man dressed up like Paul Revere? Sarah says all this as Gus eats his breakfast on the first day of school. I try to tell her with a nudge of my nose and to her knee, too much talking for the morning. Better to be quiet and let Gus get himself ready. I don't know if I'm right about this, though. I'm guessing, really. Maybe she understands what I'm saying because she stops talking. Then Mark comes in and fills the silence. Who's excited for 5th grade? He says, clapping his hands. I know I am, and Chester is too. He touches Gus's shoulder, which we all know is a mistake. Gus doesn't like to be touched at all unless he's in control of the touching, like when he gives someone a hug. This doesn't happen very often, but I've seen it a few times. He will hug his mother or father from behind. They're always surprised. Thank you for the hug, they'll say. He's never done this to me. I think he's still scared I'll touch him accidentally. Now, even though Gus flinches because he doesn't like to be touched, Mark leaves his hand there. I don't know why Mark does this on a morning when everyone is already nervous enough. I worry that Gus might explode from too much touching, but he surprises me. He bends his head so his cheek touches his dad's hand. He leaves it there for a few seconds. That's nice, I say, letting your dad touch your shoulder. I wish he could hear me. I wish he could know how doing this helps us all feel better. I remember when I thought Penny could understand what I said, and I talked to her all the time because it seemed like she was listening. But of course she wasn't. She loved me, I knew, but she could never hear me. Which is why I can't believe my ears when I hear Gus say, I know. He hasn't moved his lips, but I hear him say it anyways. It's a simple, clear boy's voice that I've never heard him actually use. When they come, his words are mostly high and squeaky and hard on the ears. Sarah keeps account of the words he uses, but I'm not sure why, because I've never heard him say any words that mean anything. Until now. I scoot closer to his chair, though. I'm careful not to touch any part of his body, because I know he has to concentrate on letting his dad's hand sit on his shoulder like that. It's nice of you letting him touch you this morning. He's nervous too. We all are. I'm saying too much again, maybe. I can't help it, though. I feel anxious like a puppy again with everything going on. I said I know. I'm trying. I watch him carefully. His eyes are closed and his lips haven't moved. I don't know how he just did that. I know he talked, though. I heard him. I know it was Gus because he sounded like he was tired of being the center of attention. Like he loves his parents, but he wants to get this day over with. I know how he feels because I feel the same way. I'm nervous too. Even though I found out this morning I don't have to stay the whole time today, I just have to walk inside so all the kids can meet me. Then Miss Winger, the teacher, will tell us when I can start coming to school. Gus doesn't say any more to me for the rest of breakfast, which is okay. It was very exciting to talk to each other, but I'm not going to push it or ask him a lot of questions about why he walks or drones or likes sparkly pens so much. Even though I'm not staying at school, Sarah thinks it's a good idea for me to wear my old blue service dog and training vest. Last night, she and Mark had an argument about it. This way there won't be any questions. Everyone will understand he's a working dog. But his vest says in training, Mark said. That's okay. I've already explained all this, and I promise no one will be reading what it says. The point is to have him look official. Won't people wonder why he's still wearing a training vest a year from now? No one will care because they'll love him so much, Sarah said, hugging me. Mark lowered his voice. You don't worry. You're setting your sights a little too high for all this. He's just a dog, after all. It'll be a novelty for a week, and then it'll wear off, and he'll be like every other person who hovers around Gus and tries to get him to look up. Sarah sat up. Oh, don't say it like that, Mark. I'm sorry, he said, laughing. I'm kidding. I just think we do better when we get into things with low expectations. I think Mark is right, but I also think it's too late. We're all too nervous, and Sarah has told us too many times how great 5th grade is going to be.